Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, let's go. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my mother and I have had our share of problems. Just like many other toxic mother-daughter relationships, I left home as a teenager to escape the abusive environment our home had become. I moved in with a friend in a different state, which also didn't end well. But that's a story for another time. I continued to keep communication open with my mother despite the difficulties. She's continued to cause drama at every major event in my life, but I consider myself adept at moving on at this point. I have planned paid time off coming up in a couple of months, because my job will be closed for renovations, and she has been planning a visit during this time. Over the past few months, she's mentioned it a few times, and we've worked through the details together. Today, she emailed me to say that when she comes to visit, she will likely not have funding for anything more than gas. She plans to bring a tent for her and her husband to sleep in during the stay, and has inquired about available space in my yard. She is fully aware that I do not own the home I live in, and that I do not have the right to allow her to stay in our yard in a tent and use our facilities for any amount of time, much less several days. At first, I hoped it was some awful attempt at humor, putting me in an uncomfortable position in order to laugh at my discomfort, because it's something she's done several times in my life. Once, she even pretended to have full-blown Tourette syndrome, complete with vocal tics worthy of an episode of South Park, in the middle of a crowded shopping center, just to laugh at my humiliation at her antics. So this seemed likely. Unfortunately, she was serious, and when I told her no, that I couldn't help her with this, she simply said, "All right, I'll figure it out myself," as though it isn't the most irresponsible choice to drive halfway across the country as a grown adult who knows they cannot afford to do such a thing. I have no idea what will happen, but I'm expecting a "what? Don't you want to see us?" response anytime, since I advised her not to make the trip at all since she clearly can't afford it. As a grown adult who can't afford to travel myself, I am astounded at the audacity. Edit. Wow, I have never gotten this much of a response on any post in the past, so I'm going to answer a few questions I feel matter that I've seen in the comments. Why not cut her out completely? I honestly don't have a good reason, just that I'd feel guilty. I'm the only family member out of state, and I worry that cutting her out will result in the loss of family I would regret losing. I'm just afraid, I guess. Why don't you offer to put her in a hotel? I'm like a lot of people in my age group these days. Struggling. I'm not even the only earner in the house, and we're still chasing the wrong end of the paycheck at the end of the day. I'd love to have been able to go back and visit myself, but it would be irresponsible to attempt a trip I can't afford, and putting my own little family at risk is not worth the moment of happiness I might find checking in on others I miss. Is it possible her living situation has changed and she doesn't plan on leaving my yard? I never even considered this, and it horrified me to see it worded out. I would love to think she could never pull something like that, but honestly, I feel like anything is possible. Thank you all for your logical advice. I really appreciate knowing that my own little circle isn't wrong to think the things I've seen here. I'm still waiting to hear how she responds to my suggestion that she not come, and I will do my best to post an end to this unfortunate story. Edit 2. Wow. Okay, apparently this whole "I can't afford anything but gas" story was all a ruse to get to spend more time together while she visits. Allegedly, she is more than comfortable financially and has no fear that this trip will put her into financial hardship, as she is making better money than ever before. Plus, she gets really good deals on rooms because she works for a popular hotel brand. I honestly don't know what to think at this point. I honestly don't know if it'll be worse if she's lying about her financial stability to make me feel better and let my guard down about her visit, or if it's 100% legitimate and she lied about financial hardship simply to play on my emotions. Either way, I can't stop her from making the trip. All I can do is make sure I stick to my boundaries and not allow her to overstep them. Thank you all for your helpful advice and honest opinions. Hard as it may be to hear some of them, I can't deny it all needed to be said. Hey everyone, I just needed to get something off my chest and maybe get some advice. Here goes nothing. I, 31, female, have been dating my boyfriend, 28, male, for 4 years, and we're moving in together in 2 weeks. I'm super excited because I've never taken this step before in a relationship. I've lived alone since I was 24, and this is a big change for me. I grew up pretty privileged, and I'm really grateful for everything my parents have provided for me. My boyfriend, on the other hand, grew up in a lower-income household, which is a bit of a different story. My boyfriend has a full-time job managing a local coffee shop. He pays his bills and has never asked me for money. He tried going to college, but it didn't work out for him. He knows that managing the coffee shop isn't a forever gig, but he's content for now. As for me, I'm pretty ambitious. I manage a department at a hospital, complete with a pension plan and all that adult stuff. I also waitress on the weekends to earn some extra cash. On top of that, I dog sit, cat sit, and dog walk for the doctors I work with because I'm cheaper than kennels and a huge animal lover. With all this extra income, I managed to buy a piece of land last year with cash. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. I've been doing the two-job thing for almost 5 years now, and I'm burnt out like never before. I work 6 days a week, sometimes 7, and it's really taking a toll on my mental health. Now that my boyfriend is moving in and will be paying half the bills, I've been seriously considering quitting my part-time job to get a better work-life balance. I confided in my mom about how burnt out I am. It was actually on my birthday last week. I showed up to my family birthday dinner in tears because I had to reschedule my own birthday party after being called into the restaurant. I don't get to see my friends all that much, so I was really looking forward to it. I told my mom that I don't really want my second job anymore because I don't need the extra income to afford my car, rent, bills, etc. anymore. I also mentioned that I've given up on homeownership in the near future, at least on my own. Well, my mom made some pretty nasty comments like, "You better get used to a life of financial struggle if you want to stay with him." That really hurt, because I never even brought that up. I was already pretty upset, and her comments almost made me walk out. I've always wanted validation from my parents, and this has bothered me over the years. I've been going to therapy about my burnout for the past month through the Employee Assistance Program at work. Lately, therapy has been turning into sessions about how much pressure I put on myself to do it all, because of how I was raised. My boyfriend knows about my parents' opinions of him and still sticks around. His unconditional love means a lot to me, especially since my parents' love feels very conditional. He has been my rock during this mental health struggle, and it's upsetting that I don't receive that same support from my parents. It's almost like they're disappointed that I can't handle everything on my own. I've been trying to figure out how to move forward with my parents. I know they love me in their way, but their comments and expectations are weighing heavily on me. It's like they can't see how much I'm struggling, or they just don't want to acknowledge it. They've always pushed me to be the best, to achieve more, to never settle. While I appreciate that drive, it's also exhausting trying to live up to those expectations all the time. Sometimes I wonder if they would be happier if I ended up with someone who matched their vision of what my partner should be. Someone with a high-paying job, a prestigious career, someone who can provide financially as they did. But that's not what I want. My boyfriend is amazing in so many ways that aren't measured by his income. He's kind, supportive, and understands me like no one else. He's there for me in ways my parents have never been. I've been thinking a lot about what I want for my future. I know I need to take better care of myself and find a balance that works for me. Maybe quitting my second job is the first step towards that. But I also need to find a way to communicate with my parents that their constant pressure and lack of support are hurting me. I need them to understand that my happiness isn't solely based on financial success. It's about feeling loved, supported, and being with someone who truly cares for me. So, here I am, trying to figure out my next steps. How do I set boundaries with my parents without pushing them away completely? How do I make them understand that my boyfriend is good for me, even if he doesn't fit their ideal? And most importantly, how do I find the balance and peace I desperately need in my life? If anyone has been in a similar situation or has any advice, I would love to hear it. Thanks for listening. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. This happened last October 1st, the morning of my daughter's wedding. Had I not been in a hurry to get to the venue, things may have played out differently. I will never know. I was there to buy distilled water for the steamer needed to steam her dress and the bridesmaids' dresses. Time was of the essence. I was patiently waiting in line with an elderly couple finishing up in front of me. The woman was in front of me, standing near the credit card payment terminal, and her cart was behind her. Her husband was at the end of the line, bagging groceries. The cashier mentioned she would bag his items, and he cheerfully replied that he had done it for years for a living and didn't mind. His wife laughed and said he liked helping out. I was in line, as I mentioned, and I had my debit card ready in my hand. I smiled and chimed in on the conversation. I tend to talk with my hands, so as we were all chatting, I was waving my right hand in the air. My hand was visible the entire time. Suddenly, I was shoved hard from behind. I was pushed into the little old lady, and she in turn shoved the cart into her husband. My first thought was that someone had tripped and fallen into me. I recovered and looked behind me to see this elderly man, hair sticking straight up, mask below his nose, glaring at me while he slammed items onto the conveyor belt. The conversation went like this: "Me, can I help you, elderly man? I shoved you because you shoved her, and I am not about to let you shove me. So I beat you to the punch. Ha ha ha." He was yelling this at me, pulling his mask down and leaning into my face. Idiot, I could feel myself getting hot all over. I don't like confrontation, but he actually hurt my shoulder. I have fibromyalgia, and a simple hug can be excruciating. Meanwhile, the old couple in front of me just booked it out of there. I never got to apologize to the woman or her husband. Me. I didn't touch her. Meanwhile, the cashier was ignoring this, and quietly ringing up my distilled water. Elderly man, I saw you shove her, so I beat you to the punch. You people today are all the same. Then he gestured to my gallon of distilled water. Have you ever heard of a faucet? You are what's wrong with the world, drinking fancy water when you can drink out of a hose. You are stupid, he kept yelling at me. But I just closed off and could hear the sound but no longer make out the words. I think I went into mild shock. I wanted to scream at this man and defend myself, but at the same time, why should I defend why I'm buying a gallon of distilled water? He shoved me and had absolutely no right to. I thought maybe the cashier would say, "Hey sir, settle down," or something. She said nothing. I was robotically swiping my debit card, just thinking, I have to get to my daughter. She gets married today. I have to get to my daughter. She is waiting. I have to get to my daughter. I grabbed my water and made a hasty exit. As I was leaving, I heard him say to the cashier, "Where did you get that shirt? It's ugly. I have seen better shirts in the trash." "Do you know how silly you look?" she replied. "I like this shirt. I am ready for Halloween." It was a shirt with the upper part of a skeleton, ribs, sternum, etc. He just kept on, and she ignored him. It was then I realized this was a disturbed, possibly senile old guy. But still, I needed to get to my car. I was on the verge of tears, which happens when I get angry. I got to my car, locked the doors, and began to shake. Then I couldn't stop. I burst into tears and shook uncontrollably for about 5 minutes. That's when it hit me. I was assaulted, and I did nothing. I froze. I was victimized mildly, but I cannot imagine how women recover from more violent assaults, and I have a deep respect for those who can. My shoulder was on fire. Absolutely no employee in that store came to my defense. I drove to my daughter's venue, still in shock. After the wedding, hours later, I was in the shower. My husband came in and I had a bruise the size of a tennis ball on my left shoulder area. He inquired, and when I explained, white-hot rage went through this man. My giant of a husband would have never allowed that man to do what he did. Had he been there, we most likely would have been delayed by police. So I am grateful that didn't happen. I think about it all the time. I wish I had defended myself. I wish the cashier had called security. I wish I had not crawled inside myself and shut down the way I did. To anyone who has survived assault, you are brave. You matter. You did not deserve it. You are a survivor. Mine was a rough shove, and I still shake when I think about it. Ages ago, I worked a frontline job at City Hall, registering cars and dogs and collecting money for parking tickets, property taxes, and the like. So, a basic entry-level municipal finance grunt, bottom of the food chain, nowhere close to being the one making the ordinances or rules, etc. Grunt. This was before the days of taking credit cards and debit cards for such payments, before smartphones, before the online banking world really began. Ages ago. Paper. The city's ordinance on tax interest stated that interest would accrue daily against any past due tax bill at a rate of blah blah % per annum. Property taxes were due quarterly. Many people would come in to pay cash on the tax due date. Many more would remit their payment by checks through the mail. We kept extremely thorough paper records of all payments received through the mail, retaining their remittance stub, the envelope bearing the postmark, which was the date we would use to calculate any interest if it arrived past the due date. If the postmark was before or on the due date, no interest was charged. These were batched daily by each clerk, filed by date in our vault, so anyone who needed to could find any receipt remittance fairly quickly. We needed to, often, as did the city auditor. Anyway, business as usual, and the few days following the tax due, we would always get a few stragglers through the mail, and the daily interest would have started adding up. Not by a lot. For most homeowners this would amount to just a few cents a day. We would send them a receipt in the mail with a note that they have a small balance now due to accrued interest, but we would hold it at the amount for 10 days. Most people would just send another check. Some would ignore it, and others would come in to pay in person. Finally, the stars aligned and I got one, a real peach of a gentleman, who was extremely disgruntled that he got a bill in the mail for this goddamn interest bullshit, which he slapped down on the counter inches from my face. He then slammed a repurposed melatonin bottle full of pennies down on top of the paper, and said, "I hope whoever sent me this goddamn bill has to count these goddamn pennies," at top volume for all of City Hall to hear. I could tell already that it was mine. I saw my initials on the receipt when he slapped it down. Cue malicious compliance. I smiled as big as I could, said I would find out who had processed it, and took his receipt to the vault. I didn't even give him enough time to react. I just got up and went to the vault, while cheerfully saying, "It'll just be a minute," before disappearing from his sight. I found the paperwork, including his 2 days late postmarked envelope. Then I sat down at my desk, took the melatonin bottle, looked him in the eye and said, "You're in luck today, sir. I'm the one who sent this balance due to you, so I will be able to count these pennies for you." And I did. I counted all 39 of those goddamn pennies, and I counted them one by one, very thoroughly. It took him about 20 minutes to pay his fucking 39 cents from the minute that bottle hit the counter to the end of it. I was extremely pleasant and cordial, and smiling at him the entire time. It was just fun at that point, so I kept pouring it on. Just so sweet. His face was practically purple by the end, and as he slunk out the door, without the smug satisfaction he was expecting when he slammed that melatonin bottle on my counter, I said, "Have a great rest of your day, weather's beautiful," and it was. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.